So, hello everyone, and welcome to another indie author interview. I am joined today by Maddox Grey, who is the author of the Lost Legacies series, the sixth one, which just came out this past week, right?
Yep, came out on Tuesday.
Awesome, awesome. So, let's just get right into it. So, tell me a little bit about what made you kind of decide to want to be an author, as well as what your path to publication was.
Yeah. Um, so like a lot of authors, it was like sort of fanfic, only I
Mm-hmm.
never actually wrote any fan fiction. But I have a very active over imagination, and so whatever show I was obsessed with, I would just like write my own episodes in my head, which for most of my teenage years was the Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Uh,
Yes.
it's I basically had this like whole alternative universe in my head. I would invent new characters, like completely off script. And it took years for it to occur to me that I had basically written a book inside my head that at this point had nothing to do with any other universe.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, huh, maybe I should like actually try and do my own thing. Uh,
Mm.
and so I started writing A Shift in Shadows about 10 years ago. I wrote about 70,000 words, and then it just sat on my shelf for years. Um, and then around 2019, I don't even remember what sparked it, but I was just like, I should take another look at this again.
Hmm.
And so I basically rewrote the entire thing because what I had written 10 years ago, I was like, oh, I can do this better. Um, and then COVID happened, and
Mm-hmm.
was in lockdown like everyone else for 9 months, and rewriting it is sort of what made me not go insane. Um, so yeah, and like I never had any interest in trying to get traditionally published. I happened to fall in a community with a lot of other indie authors, and I was like, I don't feel like spending years getting rejected.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to write very queer normative worlds. So there are a lot of queer characters in my books, and I'm like, there is no way any traditional publisher is gonna be on board with this. Because it's not specifically queer fantasy. It's just I happen to have a lot of queer characters because I am a queer person. So that's my norm. So yeah, 2021 came and I published A Shift in Shadows, and a lot of people loved it immediately. And then I just sort of continued onward.
Wow, that's awesome. That's, I mean, and so 2021, 2024, so you've published six books or more.
Um, in Lost Legacies, including the prequel novella, I published 7 books and then
Wow.
started a new pen name. But it's still a fantasy romance. It's just much spicier fantasy romance.
Mm-hmm.
And I have 1 book published in that series so far. So I'm up to 8 published books. Uh,
Wow. Wow.
yeah.
That's awesome. And you're totally right with the timeline, right? Like that would have taken years and years and years and trad.
Yeah.
Hmm. And so, how do you write your books? Do you plan? Do you pants? Do you outline? What do you do when you write?
I call it organized chaos.
Mm.
Um, I started very much being a pantser. And that's sort of how I went for the first 2 books of Lost Legacies. I just had a general idea of where I wanted things to go. Um, but then like I just kept obsessing about the series more and more. And I now so Lost Legacies is going to be a 12 book series.
Wow.
And I know like everything that's going to happen in like each book onward. So I don't outline every single chapter, but I basically have like, here's what's going to happen in this book. Here's what's going to happen in this book. I tend to, and I didn't really intentionally set out to do this, but the books are somewhat episodic or like Monster of the Week themed. So each book has its own plot and like ending that is unique to that book and contained, but there is still like an overarching series story that is getting told. So I don't do a lot of cliffhangers in Lost Legacies, sort of. It's things are starting to get a little bit more hairy for the characters. Um, so yeah, so for Lost Legacies, it's it's pretty rigid what I'm like writing now because there are certain things that have to happen in each book going forward. So I basically have a list of here are the things that have to happen in this book for both plot and characters. Um, and just the way that my mind works, I tend to sometimes I'll think about a scene that I want to happen in book 11, and I can't let that scene go. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll write that scene even though I'm technically writing book 7 right now. So this means whenever I start writing a new book, a lot of times I have several of the chapters already written, and I sort of have to fill in the gaps. So
That's an
that's
interesting way to kind of go about writing. And I actually think that's kind of cool that because then you can be like, oh, like I already have something, for that book. So then kind of getting started because you have something, maybe it's a little bit more motivation, a little bit, easier
yeah.
to kind of navigate.
Yeah, and I think like when you have inspiration for a scene, even if it's not for the book that you're currently writing, it is good to get it down.
Mm-hmm.
Just so that you have it for the future and it makes your mind happy. You're like, yes, like I got it out. It's there. So now I can like make a note of it, put it aside and go back to what I was doing.
Absolutely. My ADHD brain loves that.
Yeah.
Um, and so what do you enjoy most about writing fantasy romance? Why is that the genre for you?
So for Lost Legacies, I always call that series like fantasy romance with urban fantasy vibes
Mm-hmm.
because it starts off in our world, and for the most part, the characters are in our world, but they jump to other realms like the Fae realm, the Dragon realm. So it's not exactly urban fantasy, but it's not exactly secondary world fantasy romance either. And that's kind of what I love about indie publishing is you can do that and
Do
know
whatever you want. You don't have
yeah,
to go by anybody's rules other than your own. And very
yeah,
clearly, it's working for you.
yeah. It's a lot of fun. But like what I like about that series and kind of writing in this genre is there are a lot of different ways to write your main characters.
Mm.
And so for my main character of that series, she is like a kick-ass, morally gray character in that like she does some like questionable things. Like this isn't a morally gray character who's like doesn't really do things that are super bad. Like there are some that are like, oh, like I'm willing to do whatever I have to do, but I'm gonna like take pity on this one villain and I'm gonna walk away with him alive. Like, no, like Nemain just kills people. She's like, oh, like I don't care that you are like unarmed and begging for your life. You came after me and you came after my family. So you out. And I kind of like love that about her that she's so ruthless and a little bit unhinged. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and she never backs away from that. It's not like we meet her like that and then she becomes a hero, good guy. She's just always going to be this way. Uh,
Mm.
and so it's fun to write that in fantasy romance. And the love interest she eventually ends up with is the same way. So it's two morally gray people who are not always the sanest, who are just like expanding that in each other. So that's a lot of fun to write. And just, I love happily ever afters.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, that takes some of, like, for me as a reader, that's why I love the romance genre. Because no matter what happens, no matter what the characters go through, they're gonna get that like happily ever after ending. Um, so I like that. And then for my spicier series, it's a Why Choose series, and that's just fun because
Love
it's
that.
like there's no choosing. So
Mm-hmm.
that's like the result of me reading multiple love triangle books and being like, there's an answer here.
I respect it.
Yeah, so that's sort of like what made me fall in love with that genre.
Very, very cool. And I can see that you have some stuff on your whiteboard back there. So I'm assuming this is probably part of maybe one of the space, if not the space that you write. So what do you have in that space that helps you stay on task and helps you stay focused on what you're doing?
Yeah. So I basically have to write in more or less silence or like quiet zone. Like it's just what I need. And My poor partner, sometimes I'll work on the couch and he'll try and work next to me, but he types really loudly. And like my mind just like I latch on to other noises.
Mm-hmm.
Then all I can hear is him typing, and I'm like, I need you to go away. Um, so yeah, I tend to work in mostly quiet zones sometimes just because I have a day job and I also work from home. I just need to get out of the house to like have a separation between my work and writing books. So I work out of cafes a lot, which
Mm-hmm.
obviously there's a lot of noise there. And so in those cases, I do listen to music, specifically music that does not have lyrics. I know some folks can like listen to music
Mm-hmm.
uh, like
Not
normal
me.
music. Yeah, like if there's lyrics in it, that's what I'm gonna be hearing. So I listen to a lot of shoegaze music, like Mogwai and Russian Circles, just because it's very dramatic and it's just sort of you can slip into the melody in the background and it drowns out the noise of everyone talking around me. And then lately I got into Vitamin Quartet. They're the ones that do like the orchestra stringed instrument covers. If you watch Bridgerton, that's the name of
Yep.
the show.
Yep.
Um, if you watch
I know
that
what you're
show,
talking about. Mm-hmm.
yeah, like it's a lot of like that style of music. So they'll cover popular songs, but in this like instrumental way. Um, and I will just have that blaring like my poor eardrums. I'm just like, I need you to block out everything else. So yeah, that's sort of what I do. It's either complete quiet or that type of music.
Well, that's what I do too. I go to cafes or like coffee shops and I put on my noise canceling headphones and I actually just like Spotify just must know like what works for me because exactly what you said, like it's a playlist of like a bunch of like instrumental like popular songs.
Yeah,
And they're with strings and things like that. So like I recognize the beat and like what it is, but I don't have to sing it. So it's like a
yes,
nice like familiarity, but then it's, and it also blocks everything out. And like it's crazy when I finish like my sprint, like when I'm gonna leave and I have to take off my headphones, it feels so weird to like not have your headphones on and like be listening
yeah,
to that. It's so weird. It's a weird experience. um,
definitely.
so what's your kryptonite, Maddox? What gets in your way?
Oof. So I I have released a lot of books and I have upped my timeline for writing, just because I'm really trying to finish these two series so that I have a completed series.
Mm,
And so I had to write pretty quickly. I tend to write one book every 3 months, just like the first draft of the book, and then I spend several months editing it. Um, the problem that I have is if I get stuck on a scene, it is
mm,
very hard for me to let go of that scene. So sometimes I'll only write like 1,000 words over a span of 3 or 4 days, just because I'm trying to get this one scene working and it's just not. If I'm in a good flow and I'm not blocked, I can easily write 1,000 words in half an hour.
mm-hmm,
So most days I'll write like 2,000 words a day. On weekends I'll write more because I have all day to write. But yeah, like if my mind cannot let it go. And so sometimes I just had to like sit down and think about the scene, not worry about writing it, just be like, okay, what do I want to happen here? What is the character's mindset and all that? And I just had to like work through the block.
mm,
I tend to write fairly clean first drafts, so it's very rare that like during editing I had to completely rewrite a chapter or anything. It's usually more like fine tuning. So that's why I don't stress too much about being stuck because I know that if I fix it now, it'll make the editing process easier later.
mm-hmm,
Some authors just like to blow through that first draft. They're like, I'll fix it in editing, which is fair. I wish I could do that. I can't.
mm-hmm. I think what was whoever wrote Bird by Bird, and I forget what how her name is. She says that she has the shitty first draft, thing that
Yeah.
she goes off of. But I also feel like similar to you, like I want the first draft to be at least like as good as it can be. Like maybe I need to like change paragraph structure and stuff like that,
Yeah.
but as long as everything, you know, can if it can be fixed with proofreading and, you know, like line editing, like very small things, at least it's not like a huge like developmental edit sort of thing. So I definitely relate to you in that.
Yeah.
So let's go on to talking about the first. So we'll talk about A Shift in Shadows, which, funnily enough, usually I read the entire series before I interview an author, but because yours are so like you have such a long series, I have not had the chance to read all of them. So no spoilers for me or for anybody watching or listening. It's kind of funny. Usually I'm like the one who's like, oh no, like
Yeah.
no spoil, but I really like because I've read them, but I haven't. So I'm super excited actually about this. Um, so if you had to describe A Shift in Shadows in one sentence or less, what is that sentence?
Oof. Oh man, this is tough because I prepared ahead of time, but I did it for the most recent release and not A Shift in Shadows. Um, hmm. I mean, this sort of still works. Am I allowed to swear?
Yes.
Okay. Um, so this will still work of it being emotional roller coaster where a warlock fucks around and finds out.
That's actually I
Yeah.
love that. I love that pitch. I would read it. I did read it. I think I read A Shift in Shadows twice. I first read it. I think it was one of those like the Pharaoh Fab, I think, or
Yeah.
I got the copy there, and then there was also an audiobook, like stuff your earbuds, and I got the audiobook and I listened to the audiobook because I love audiobook. So
Same.
I have actually read the first one twice. Um, but now that we have that aside, I think that the summary of the first one, I think that we could get into the sixth one. So who is your favorite character to write and why?
So this is also hard. I mean, like the easy choice is the main because I really love my main character. But putting aside the easy choice of the main, it's probably Pele, who
Mm,
is she's flying a little bit under the radar in the book so far. Some books she's a bigger like cast member. I have a stupid amount of characters in my books. And as you continue reading them, like you can be like, really, Maddox? Like, how many characters do you need? And all of them is the answer. Um, so it's like some books, some of them get more page time than others, and
mm-hmm.
I try and always like bring characters back. Um, but Pele she's a demon, she's Nemain's oldest friend. And they've been in like they're both friends and lovers. Um, and so like there is like a poly relationship throughout the books, which is kind of low key. People don't always like realize that. It will be a much bigger factor later on in the books. But Pele is a demon. The demons in my books have their own realm, and they have like a somewhat democratic way of leading. Like they have like a council and they have someone who leads that council. Um, Her father leads that council right now, and he will be retiring in the books, which like she's always known. So she's very much a politician, and she's very crafty. She's always in everyone's business and like I need to know what's going on so I can blackmail them with it later, or so that I don't get like, you know, like sideswiped by it. And unlike Nemain, who is a little bit unhinged and very much a fighter and just like goes off on everything, like Paley just thinks about everything. She
Mm,
overthinks about everything, which is what I identify with. Um, she was very much in love with someone throughout this series, and she is overthinking it and be like, this will not work for like a whole bunch of reasons. So I really like Pele, and she is going to be getting her own book. Hers is book 9. Um, and despite her like low-key nature throughout the series, like if someone comes after Nemain, she has fire magic. She's super politically like advantaged. Um, and she will destroy people who goes after those she loves, but she'll do it in the background and you'll just never know it. Like Pele is a person who will hide the bodies for you before you even know there are bodies to hide.
Mm.
She's just like taken care of. Don't worry about it. Um, so I like her. I'm excited to write her book in 3 more books.
And so, conversely, who is the most challenging to write?
Oof. Hmm. Oddly enough, right now it's kind of the villains in Lost Legacies.
Mm,
Just because the second going back to like me loving Buffy and like those other shows growing up, the concept of there being like a big bad is very much a thing that I have. And so there has been a big bad in Lost Legacies. He's always been there from the beginning. You just didn't know he was there. Um, and so he's the exiled Fae King who we haven't even seen yet. We've only heard his name and we only know like
mm,
what he's done. But he has like almost every single enemy that we've met in Lost Legacies is connected to him. They're either allied with him, they're doing his bidding. Um, so like he's just like the puppet master behind everyone. And we're
mm,
going to meet him soon. And I am very like anxious about it. I'm like, oh, like we're finally gonna like meet him. Um,
mm,
and I sort of like know I know about his personality, like that part I figured out, but like I don't know what he looks like yet in my head. Um, so I have a lot of like little details I need to figure out with him, and we're gonna like meet him relatively soon. So I'm like, I need to figure that out. So yeah, that's my current like and
mm,
it's one of those scenes where we're not gonna see him a lot. He's probably only gonna be in 1 or 2 scenes in one of the upcoming books. So like those scenes have to matter. Like you had like I want readers to like walk away from that book being like, oh man, that dude is like bad news all the way around. I don't like this. So yeah, it's both fun and challenging.
Interesting, interesting. And I think, you're very, very right, where if you're not putting, that character, in so much, like his scenes have to have like a really big impact. Um, and so what is your favorite scene or quote from any of your books?
Um, my favorite quote, and I like this one because it's like not spoilery in any way. Um, it's from A Shift in Fortune, and like Nemain has collected even more misfits at this point, and she's trying to find another misfit to help a younger misfit with her magic. And so they're trying to hunt this person down. This person has 2 animal companions because I also like inject animals into my books. There are 2 fake cats, Jinx and Luna, that you meet in A Shift in Shadows. This other character also has a like magical cat. Um, and also a winged wolf. Because I was like, all right, I have 3 cats. I need to balance out with a wolf. There we go. Perfect. Um, and so Nemain like brings these people to find this other person, and the person they're trying to find isn't there, but her animals are there. And her cat is grumpy because of course he is. And he says something very mean to a person under the main's protection. Because he has like really messed up magic that he shouldn't have, and so he's viewed as kind of like a freak. Um,
Mm,
so the cat says something mean to this person, and another person in the group basically like does something kind of nasty to the cat. The cat's fine though, don't worry about it. It's like a
okay.
psychological hit of like, hey, back off. Um, and so Nemain says, we're all monsters here and we protect our own. And I just
Mm,
always love that line because there are some like happy, chippy people like in Nemain's group, Casey being one of them. Um, but a lot of them are either morally gray like her or have magic or something about them that makes the rest of the people in their various like societies view them as the other or different. Uh,
mm.
so I just sort of I like her little collection of all of these misfits.
Cool. Cool. Um, and so sometimes when we write, we imagine our characters to look a certain way, certain features and things like that. So is there anybody that you would fan cast as your main characters who exist out there in the world of acting or modeling or whatever?
Yeah, so there are so in the main, looks wise is inspired by a very specific actor. Because around the time that I was writing A Shift in Shadows, I was watching Killjoys, which was on Sci-Fi, I think. It is a wonderful, campy sci-fi show that I cannot recommend enough. But the person who plays the main character, Dutch, is the actor I wrote down, Hannah John Kamen. Um, Trying to think of other like so she was the lead in that show and she was also in Ant-Man, the second Ant-Man movie. She played the woman who like phases in and out of existence.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else she's been in, but she like I love her as an actor. Um and so yeah, like the main very much like looks like her. Totally inspired, somewhat personality inspired. If you mashed up Faith from Buffy and this character Dutch from Killjoys, like that's kind of the main. Um, so yeah, so the main, easy, inspired by her. The other major character from A Shift in Shadows, Magos, inspired by Idris Elba, both in looks and kind of personality. Um, like that just immediately was in my head, like that's who this character is. Um, and Eddie, who you sort of meet in Shift in Shadows, Eddie would be Charlie Hunnam.
Oh,
Yeah. And so those are the three that had like immediate actors who were like, yeah, that's them.
awesome picks. Awesome picks. Usually that trips people up. So I'm glad we had answers to that. Okay, so let's move on to the last part of the interview. Just kind of some questions that are get to know you, things that I would want to know. So other than reading and writing, what are some things that you enjoy doing in your free time?
I am a pretty big video gamer. Um, and like I play video games to relax. Unfortunately, the video games that I like to play are things like Dark Souls, which are known for being extremely difficult and frustrating. So me relaxing is sitting on the couch screaming at the TV, like for like multiple hours. So yeah, that's basically what I do. If I'm not reading or writing, I'm probably gaming.
Cool, cool. And so this is my favorite question, so I'm gonna get at my Goodreads. Who are some authors or books that you would recommend?
Yeah. Um, there are so many, but the one that I will like forever just recommend is anything by Alona Andrews. I am the biggest fan of Alona Andrews. So their Kate Daniels series to me is like the perfect urban fantasy series. But anything they write, phenomenal. Uh, Lately I got into the Stacia Stark. She writes the
Yep,
Kingdom of Lies series,
yep.
and she also writes the Urban Fantasy series, which I love. I can't remember the
I
name of
haven't
the.
read the urban one. I've read the other ones though. Is it
Yeah,
Speak of the Demon?
I think so. It's a
Deals with demons.
yeah. Um, it's a really good urban fantasy series. Like if you like her, the Kingdom of Lies is more like straight fantasy romance.
Mm-hmm.
But her urban fantasy series is fantastic. Another one that I read recently is the Living Legend series by
Yep.
Ali Shafee. I think there are two books out.
Two. Yep.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, those were fun.
Awesome. Good
And
recommendation.
yeah, and T.A. White, I will throw out. Um,
T.A. Whites.
yeah, she writes a she writes some like fantasy romance series, but the like her favorite series is the Firebird Chronicles.
Found it. Rules of
Yeah.
Redemption.
And it's like everyone's like, but it's sci-fi. I'm like, there's like a fantasy element to it, and it is like if you like a lot of action, if you like slow burn romance and banter, like it's really
Awesome. I just added those to my to be read, so we have
good.
more books to read. If you had to give advice to a younger you or to an aspiring author, what would that advice be?
Oof. First, like, be kind to yourself.
Mm,
Um, it's very easy to get overwhelmed when you're starting out to like try and do all the things. Um, and there's no matter what stage you're at in your writing career, there is always more you can be doing.
mm,
And you just have to accept that and be like, okay, what can I do and maintain my mental health? Because if you burn out, it like it can take months or longer to recover from that burnout. And when you burn out, you kind of just have to like back away from everything and let yourself recover. Otherwise, you never will. It just becomes a cycle of like being burnt out. For me, like I very much want to be a full-time author someday, but part of the reason why I want to be a full-time author is because I want to have a job that I love. And so if you're constantly stressed out every single day, then you're not loving your job. So why are you doing it? That's just
mm.
like my point of view. Um, so figure out what you can do and then just sort of make a schedule to that. Do that for 6 months and then like figure out how you can improve it. Like writing is a skill. You will get faster at writing. You will write cleaner drafts. Like it took me years to write the first draft of A Shift in Shadows. Now I can write a first draft that I am happy with in 3 months. Um,
Wow.
but it took me like years to get to this point. And finding editors that I like to work with and all that. And the only other thing I would add to that is if something doesn't feel right with a cover designer, an editor, whatever it is, like pay them, finish that project, and then find someone else. Like,
Mm,
do not continue professional relationships with people that are causing you any type of angst or hangups. Anyone who is in this space should be a professional and should not like be mad at you for like not continuing to work with them. And if they are, you don't want to work with them anyways. Uh,
mm.
so if something doesn't feel right, trust your instincts and figure out how to extract yourself from it and move on.
Good advice. Good advice. Is there anywhere, I know you said that obviously it's part urban, but part, you know, like set in the fantasy world. So any places or worlds, excuse me, that you have read that have inspired you when you have been creating those worlds of yours?
Yeah. So I love to go to Costa Rica. Like
Oh,
I think we've been there like 5 times in the last decade.
wow.
Yeah. Like I really love the outdoors. I love animals. I really love reptiles, so I like going there. Um, and so that has definitely inspired a lot of my like the Fae world in Lost Legacies, and then also just like the wilderness in Lunaria Realms, my other series. Because I think a lot of the times when we get like outdoor scenes or environments in fantasy romance, a lot of the times it feels very either North American forest or European forest inspired, like a lot of like snowy conifer pine forests, like that type of thing. Um, and so mine are all inspired by Costa Rica, where everything is just crazy bright green,
Mm.
huge trees, brightly colored flowers, um, and things that want to eat you, which isn't really the case in Costa Rica because everything there is like small. Um, but like Costa Rica has like 100% influenced my forest. I was like, I don't want the dark and gloomy, scary forest. I want the absolutely gorgeous rainforest where you don't want to touch the flower because it will do horrible things to you.
That's awesome. Sounds like a cool place to go.
It is. I love it. Everything about Costa Rica is perfect.
Cool. Cool. And do you have any sort of upcoming events or things going on that we could meet you at?
I have a lot of events coming up in 2025. This year I only have one, which is actually in a little less than a month. I'll be at Getting Witchy with It near Salem,
Yes.
Massachusetts. That's September 14th and 15th. And then in April, I'll be at Dreaming Dirty in Maryland, which is in Baltimore. May, I'll be at Enemies and Lovers in Phoenix. June, I'll be at Getting Witchy with It again, but this one's in New Orleans, which I'm really excited about.
That's awesome.
I love New
I
Orleans.
love New Orleans too.
Yeah. So like that's gonna be like like writing retreat into book convention and then hopefully a couple of days of like actual vacation. We'll see. September is Villains and Vixen in Dallas, Texas, which is
Hmm.
my first time in Texas, which I'm excited about. And then finishing it up again in Salem with Getting Witchy with It. So I will be traveling
Wow.
a lot in 2025.
That's awesome. There's so many great places, and I've heard of getting Witchy with It. A couple of the authors that I talked to are going to be there too. So it sounds pretty cool. And I've only stopped by Salem like in the middle of summer, like, but I am obsessed with witchy stuff and um like all like paranormal everything. So I definitely gotta check it out. So I mean it's not too far from me. I'm in Connecticut, so it's not too far.
Okay. Yeah, it's about an
So
hour from me.
okay, cool, cool. All right. So I think those are all my questions, right? I didn't forget any?
I think that's everything.
Oh man, I am so proud of myself.
Yeah, you did
Um,
amazing.
so thank you so much for taking some time to chat with me today. It's been absolutely wonderful getting to talk about your books, and I cannot wait to continue the series and yell at you in direct messages.
Yeah, definitely feel free. I love it so much.
Well, have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.